go ahead and click on that. All right, I think we're
Yes, that's great.
We're in business now. Thank you. So many things to remember when we're on these Zoom rooms. All right, let me go ahead and get my screen back up here so you're seeing what I'm seeing. Okay. So again, the context, as we said, is basically what's going on in your particular area. And for each, depending on what your project is, you know, some of these contextual areas may not be as relevant. You know, the historical background, for example, if you're dealing with a particular community or city, then, you know, some of that historical background may be helpful. If you're dealing with a particular, you know, issue, then you may give more historical background in terms of, you know, what's going on, you know, in that issue. Like Joanne, you're dealing with the issue of suicide, so, you know, as you're thinking, of course, you're going to deal with suicide within Guyana. So yeah, there some of the historical background may be relevant, at least in terms of even some possible causes for the situation. You know, if there's anything in the context that you think would be relevant to, you know, to the issue of suicide in Guyana, then that would be appropriate here in the contextual situation. So again, you have to probably just use a little bit of discernment in terms of, you know, how relevant some of these sections are. Historical background, geography and demography. Some of those, you know, may be very relevant. Other times they may not be quite as relevant. You know, under demographics, I don't know, you know, age distribution, average income levels, racial issues, ethnic issues. Some of those may be helpful components to understand, say, in regards to suicide. Okay, so that may be something that we'd want to, you know, bring out in that particular situation. The current situation, of course, moves from you know, some of the more general themes to a more current issue. Okay, you know, let's just keep with your theme there, suicide. You know, what exactly is going on currently that maybe would be irrelevant? You know, personal issues. Who are the people being affected by the problem? You know, how are they being affected? What factors contribute to the ongoing existence of this problem? You know, community issues. You know, what characteristics of the community are contributing to the problem? You know, economics, inequalities, identification, upheavals in the organizational structures, etc. Organizational issues. If you happen to be if your project deals with a particular organization, then of course those issues, you know, that particular section would be relevant. If you're not really dealing with a particular organization, that would be a relevant issue. Global issues. Again, if you can see any correlations between, say, what's going on in a particular local community and some more global issues, then you may bring some of that discussion into, you know, that part of the context within the current situation. And then the final section, of course, of this context chapter is, you know, how your project, how you see your project bringing about some level of transformation within, as applied to the problem you're working with. I think, as we've said, I'm saying, and we say in the handbook, we don't expect a dissertation to completely solve some problem. Okay, obviously, when Joanne's working with a suicide issue, I do have that right, Joanne. You're the one who are dealing with suicide, right?
That's correct, sir.
Okay, just want to make sure. And so when we're dealing with that issue, we're going to determine, okay, what is it that I can see in what I'm trying to do within the limited time of my project? What kinds of transformation do I possibly anticipate? Okay, I know for you, Joanne, the fact that you're going to try to distribute some of your research in the context of maybe some discussions with those that are working in the field, you know, that will be a point of contact where you will have some opportunity to share what you've discovered, and then how that will add to the whole knowledge base, experience base of those who are working with this issue within the Guyana context. So any thoughts or questions? Just
thank you.
Context. Go ahead.
I was saying that's very true. I've addressed it in that way. So what you're saying, I totally agree with.
Okay, good. Let's see. What are you dealing with, Theo? Refresh my memory.
Mine has to do with what are the challenges facing organizational leaders in an environment of increasing systematic violence.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. And I'm trying to remember now, are you contextualizing that to a particular setting right now?
Yes, my context is the Philippines.
That's right.
And in probably in particular one or two cities.
Right. Okay. And so you're looking at various factors that could be, contributing to that, or various factors that could possibly be looked at to help improve situations. Even, how leadership is exercised at the moment. Intervention strategies are happening right now. Are there trust factors that are involved between people and authorities? Yeah, there's just a whole gamut of issues, it seems to me, that possibly be relevant for you to talk about in a context chapter. And there again, like we said, at this point, in the proposal stage, you're not necessarily going to know all those issues, but at least you can mention in the proposal stage some of the issues that you believe will be relevant for you to investigate in terms of the context of the Philippines and intervention strategies, violence, etc.
Yeah, one of the things I plan on doing is using a management tool called the Baldrige Excellence Framework, and present that and have Filipino leaders reinvent it, and see to what extent does it can they contextualize it, and does it then start giving them some idea. So it's kind of there's at least two steps there.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah. So we'll see what kind of issues that they themselves raise based upon this process of using the Baldrige framework.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We of course use the book. Well, this is a different. No, we do the one by the organizational assessment by Kathleen Imordino, right? Which in the organizational assessment class, which of course is based on the Baldrige model.
Right.
I think that will be very good just in terms of assessing what's going on there.
I guess one thing I haven't mentioned yet by my paper is I use that in my business.
Okay.
So and in particular for healthcare organizations, hospitals and healthcare organizations. So I am pretty well versed in it,
Good.
At least in a Western context, Western context.
Okay. Well, that's good. Yeah, to be able to use a tool that you have familiarity with, that will be very helpful. And it will be very interesting to see just how that applies in the context of trying to stem some of the violence issues and interactions between authorities and people in various sectors of the Philippines there. That will be quite interesting to see. Mm-hmm. Be able to then apply some of those same thoughts and findings into some of the issues that we're dealing with here, of course, in the States. Will be very, very good.
So essentially, I will recontextualize it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. That's always fun to do as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that will be good. And let's see.
Dr. Payne, I don't know if Celicia is here now, but she went off. Oh, you are? Okay, that's fine. I was just about to let them know. It's
sorry,
okay.
My computer froze and I had to shut down and redo, so I'm back.
Okay. Is anybody else having problems?
Good morning.
Is that just me? Are you guys hearing the audio?
Good morning. This is Patrick. I'm here now. I had my own problems, but I'm on my phone. Sorry, I'm not on my computer again. Hello?
Okay. Yeah, we're hearing you.
Hello?
I'm just getting a lot of distortion on my audio. I'm going to try to put on some earphones and see if that helps me at all. Anyway, my computer keeps telling me I'm low on memory, and I'm not sure I've had that message before, so I'm going to It said it can affect audio. All right. Tell me who's on the phone right now.
This is Patrick from Guyana.
Hello, Patrick. Okay, good. Glad to have you on the call here.
Yes. Thank you. And good morning to everyone else. Or good afternoon, I should say. In Guyana, it is afternoon.
Yes, it is
Good
afternoon.
afternoon.
There's three of you there, I think, in the Guyana area. And,
Good afternoon, Patrick.
yeah. All right. Well, let's go ahead and move on to the theology section a little bit. And sometimes this area causes more problems for people if they've not been accustomed to doing a lot of theological thinking in the context of a project. One of the values that we have at BGU is called doing theology. Okay, and that simply means to be looking at our experiences, the experiences of our co-laborers within an organization, within a community, and doing some reflection on what it is we see God doing, how we see possibly biblical principles being fulfilled or violated. We will see, certain themes within a particular setting that we would relate to. And it's, like I say, it's sometimes a difficult area to think about, rather than in trying to be able to do it in a way that is actually meaningful. I mean, probably most of us could just put together a 3-point message of some type to do a Bible study or whatever it is we're talking about. But we're trying, in this chapter, we're trying to think about our particular situation. I'm just trying to think. Let's use yours, Theo, for a moment. Say we're talking about, violence, leadership intervention. Are there any particular theological themes or issues that come to your mind as you even begin to think about that from a theological point of view?
Well, one of the things, the first thing that comes to my mind is just him working in the Philippines and also, working with my Filipino counterparts, is a major issue for them is what does the Bible have to say about justice?
Justice.
Okay, so justice, yeah. So for example, my last trip there, a young woman in the community was raped and murdered. Her naked body was left out on the streets, and it will never be investigated. Because of the corruption and if you're poor, there's no justice. And so, in those situations is one of the big questions they ask is where's God's justice in our lives? Right. So, violence raises that.
Very good. Yeah, the whole theme of justice.
Yes.
And what that means within the context of the violence issues there. Yeah, very good. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. How about the area of suicide? As we're kind of thinking about that, Joanne or anybody else, what kinds of theological themes could we maybe connect to that particular topic?
I think the main thing comes from the Sixth Commandment, where it says, "Thou shalt not kill." And one of the concepts is trying to get whether it's referring to if you kill yourself. Does that apply to that commandment? It's a big area, and there are lots of schools of thought. But I think killing, as God intended, is killing. Do not kill yourself. Do not kill others. But then what came to me, how does it carry on if you kill animals? And that's something that I'm struggling with a little bit. Should we kill animals? And what's the justification for that? Maybe you can answer that, Dr. Payne.
Yeah, that's a tough one. And then you have to get into the whole issue of, does an animal have a soul? And some of those issues that define, say, a created human being. And I'm losing
Yeah,
my.
do we keep it to just made in God's image, or do we extend it? Did he say animals were made in his image? No, he did not. So it's a case of how we extend that theology. And I don't know how much work is out there at the moment. I've read a couple of things around it, but I think for me the main thing is if the commandment is said we mustn't kill, then I think that extends by default to us doing it to ourselves.
Yeah, I think that's good. It might also be good, I'm just kind of thinking, if you like go through some of the Psalms, you can see where David is in total depression at times. He goes into despondency. Even if you look into some of the writings of Paul, there are places when I think he starts in probably 2 Corinthians, he talks about the fact that he was times driven to even despair of life itself. And, a person who has written half the Old Testament, the Old New Testament, was driven to that kind of despair. Those could be some interesting theological issues to possibly investigate in the context of what you're doing there. Both, we've got the issue of, what's right and wrong based on a commandment, but then also see if we can maybe identify with some particular people who wrote the Bible that will give some insight. Say you can look at some of the Psalms of David, you can look at some of the writings of Paul, and maybe do some thinking in those areas also.
Thank you, sir. That's very helpful. I mean, one of the things which come up as well is that whole area of hopelessness and depression, which has got a lot of mental health attributes attached to it. So yes, thank you. That's very helpful.
I mean, Joanne, I live in a part of the United States where a lot of people are vegetarians and vegans.
Okay.
And and Christians and non-Christians. And in my discussions with them as to why they've adopted this, is many of them will say that to the extent to which we are ready and willing to kill animals and consume them, it makes us less sensitive to the killing of human beings. So there's a philosophical issue for them, that it's that there's something that's gone wrong in our society, and that one of the reasons why we seem to be insensitive to killing humans also relates to the fact that we're not, that was, how should I say, encouraged, perpetrated, or somehow affected by the fact that we gained that sensitivity from killing animals. So anyway, so it was interesting. Yeah, then these are from people who are Christians and non-Christians, both, who say that it's more of there's a social and psychological side to this.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Theo.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Remind me again, Yvonne, what's your topic? You're working with kids, I think, in some way, aren't you? Trying to see if I'm still being heard. I'm still getting some odd messages on my computer.
I'll still hear you.
So you're being heard, but I don't think Yvonne is there.
Okay.
I don't see any mic for her.
Right.
So Lucia, do you know?
A few minutes before the V room, and she said she was preparing to come, and I see her name, but as well, I'm not seeing anything. I sent a message to her privately, but no response.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
She may not have connected eventually. I don't know what happened. And
remind me of your topics, Alicia.
Okay, I am looking at the effects. What effects can the implementation of theology of work principles have on the culture of women-led organizations in Georgetown?
Good. Yeah, that's going to be a really good, interesting topic, I think. So, of course, there's some built-in theological topics probably you can hook into there right away in terms of the roles of men and women and leadership, etc., and from a biblical point of view.
What constitutes work, right? I think that bottom line is what constitutes work.
Right.
I am looking at as well how Jesus, when they said render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, in the whole issue of taxation, and how so I want to see how I can maybe bring that in as well, because Jesus did acknowledge that there was a place for that, and that is all that all surrounds work. We have to pay taxes, we have to do those things. So you're not absolved from those, we might say, corrupt pieces in our society. But so what is work? What constitutes work? What is good work, quote unquote, good work or not good work? How do you, so those are some of the things I am, in addition to what you just mentioned about the roles of women and men in the Bible. Jesus was always surrounded by a whole lot of women. Throughout the Bible, women were always serving and undergirding the ministry.
Right.
So we have to see their role, the critical role they played in getting that done. Women were the first responders after the resurrection. The disciples were hiding, and the women responded. So
that's very good. Yeah.
How do we bring all of that in a highly patriarchal society?
Right.
Women were still very focused and very active in serving Jesus. It's
very good. I've often made the point, at least in my teaching, that in the book of Genesis, starting right from chapter 1, it says, God created them in his image, male and female, he created them in his image. And so I've always, at least what I see, that, there's that sense that without having both the male and the female perspective, we are not really getting the whole perspective that God has intended in regards to looking at any life, whether you're looking at organizational leadership or whatever. Without both those male and female perspectives, we're missing the whole picture, so to speak. And I think at least from my perspective, we have to acknowledge the fact that our gender differences give us differences of perspective, different, and they're complementary. We have to have both those perspectives in order to get the whole picture, so to speak.
Yes, I do agree.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Alicia, if I may, you made me think about my own work in that when I work with primarily with hospitals and health clinics, they're very hierarchical, and the hierarchy is in management and by the physicians, the doctors. And they like to talk about everyone else in the hospital as supporting them. They use that word a lot. And one of the things I do with them is I try to help them understand that they actually operate not in they'll be more successful if they operate in a system rather than a hierarchy. Meaning, instead of thinking of people as supporting you, that the doctors and the leaders need to say, my work wouldn't be possible were it not for you.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a big shift. And the analogy I use for them is the operating room. Physicians will very quickly go, oh, you're right, or eventually say, were it not for all the nurses and also all the support services that lead up to that surgery, I can't do my job. And that's a big shift for people to move from that hierarchical thinking, like between men and women, saying, what I do wouldn't be possible without you.
Yeah, wow.
So, challenge everywhere.
That's very good.
I think Dennis Bakke mentioned that kind of thinking and system in his book Decision Maker. I think that was very critical in how decision making is done. You don't put aside a leader, but you choose the decision maker in the particular circumstance as the need arises. Yeah. Thanks very much.
Yeah.
Right. I just came out of a faculty meeting, and one of you just talking about the joy at work environment that we seek to endorse and promote at BGU, just within our own staff and faculty relationships to one another. And Dr. Brad Smith, he had the devotions this morning, and he put together, I thought, a fairly good list. It was a criteria of about 6 or 7 characteristics of a joy at work organization. I may just send that out to you.
Would you do that? That'd be great.
To see that. We were just talking about, I was trying to see if I could bring that document up, but I closed my email just to save my memory issues here. But it had the issues in terms of, in a joy at work organization. I remember one of the characteristics was we are looking to see if the organization is operating in such a way that every person in that organization is being encouraged to express and exercise his or her total capacities for the good of the organization, the good of what God is doing in the midst of a community or whatever the situation it might be. The other was, rather than functioning just by committees, sometimes we can, committees sometimes get nothing done because you have to have so many different people making a decision. A Joy at Work organization has a point person, and that person is given authority to actually make decisions and make and sometimes fail or succeed. Okay, but a person is given real authority with responsibility. Okay, and of course that's just a standard leadership perspective, that if you're going to give a person responsibility, you need to make sure that that person has the authority to carry out that responsibility. So in a Joy Work organization, though, we have the idea that a particular person who has been delegated with a particular area of leadership, that person has the responsibility to go to others to be advised and get advice, but then that person actually has the delegated authority to make the decision. And based on all the best advice that he or she has received. And so, some of those, specific details. And of course, Dennis Baki's book, The Decision Maker, of course, it's of course written in the form of a novel, but it actually goes through a whole scenario in a company and how that whole decision-making process is exercised within the context of a Joy at Work environment. So that'll be good area to be thinking about.
I would really appreciate that, Dr. Payne. Thank you.
I'll send that. I'll just send it to everybody because I thought it was a good devotion that we worked on this morning. All right. Well, in the theologies, I did give you that little document it'll be on the website next week. I think is when you start working on that. If I remember correctly. But, I'll just look at just a few of these issues that are on the screen right now. Demon in detail, final process included the theological perspective chapter, which is analogous to the theoretical framework presented in a secular dissertation. Okay, and so any dissertation, say within the secular world, has what they would call a theoretical framework. From what theoretical perspective, whether it's a psychological model, a sociological model, a business model, a medical model, depending on what's going on, there's a framework. At BGU, we are looking for a particular theological framework, since we are a Christian school and we are seeking to understand our experiences, our environment, our communities from a God perspective, a faith integration perspective. And so that's kind of what we're looking for in this chapter. Just as in the literature review, you'd come up with possibly 3 themes, at least, 3 or 4 themes, whatever works for you. Then each one of those themes, you would try to discuss that. Say we're dealing with the issue of, is suicide, are there commandments against suicide? Or the biblical perspective, maybe that would be the topic. A biblical perspective on suicide in terms of the rightness or the wrongness of that act. And you might look at the 10 Commandments. There may be there's other issues in the law that would be looked upon. You want to investigate. There's all kinds of things, of course, with Exodus and Leviticus.
Dr. Payne, yes. I'm really sorry. Okay, Jim has turned his mic off now, but it was being heard. At least that was from my end. I don't know if anybody else heard you.
So I asked Jim privately to mute his mic. But
oh, okay. All right, Dr. Payne, would you mind repeating what you just said, if you don't mind?
I'm going to take off my screen sharing right now too, because that was also doing something to my computer, I think. Anyway, I was trying to make the point that at BGU, we're trying to have a theological framework for whatever we are doing. And I said, in a secular dissertation, there's a theoretical framework. It may be, a psychological model, a sociological model, a business model, a medical model. There's various models, say a particular dissertation might be written from. We are looking, say at a BGU dissertation, that there is also a particular theological framework, and we're trying to identify that in this chapter. And I said, say if we're dealing with, Joanne's topic of suicide in Guyana, we would look for some theological themes. The ethics of suicide based on the Old Testament, or if you found something in the New Testament. We talked about the issue of the place of depression, for example, or despondency from a biblical perspective in relationship to suicide. And I pointed to, we can find some things in the writings of Paul where he despaired of life itself. Why is that? And what might we learn in terms of a theological perspective that might be, helpful in that context? When we're looking at Theo's dissertation on Philippines, violence, how intervention by authorities, situations on the street, justice. We look at the big theme of justice, which of course is a biblical theme. That would be a very appropriate theme, it seemed, in Theo's dissertation on working on the whole area of violence and intervention strategies, etc., and how justice fits into that whole process. So yeah, I'm looking at the idea, and we've been thinking about this lately, the fact that at BGU, you as students come to this school with a lot of different backgrounds in regards to theology, or any expertise in the area of theology. When we had only the Doctor of Ministry degree, the entrance degree requirement for that particular degree was an MDiv. In an MDiv, a person must go through courses on systematic theology, courses on biblical exegesis, hermeneutics, homiletics, all these various systematic processes that are used in relationship to biblical interpretation. Now, depending on what degree program, or what your educational background is, you're not necessarily going to have that level of expertise in the area of theology or biblical interpretation. Say, if you're in a DTL degree, that was not a required prerequisite for coming into the school. So we're not going to be able to expect the same level of expertise in the area of dealing with theology and biblical interpretation from everyone, because everyone's going to come at this process with a different set of skills. But what I did in the in the handout, let me see if I can share this again without using up so much memory. We'll see if this works. Not sure why my computer is giving me so much trouble at that level. But okay. It's just, you all seeing the document right now?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Okay. I just got the distortion too. Is my voice distorted?
Yes, still a little.
That's what I figured. Okay. I'm gonna have to just stop sharing. You can kind of look at those on your own. Let me go ahead and come out of there. Okay. Did the audio quality now improve?
It has.
Yes. Okay. There's something about when I go to screen sharing. But anyway, in the document that you'll be able to look at in the Theology Week, I just talked about some of the common issues that are often addressed in a biblical exegesis, as we call it. And, it's like, who's the author of the text, to whom it was written, what's some of the historical, cultural background of the particular text that you're looking at, what's the immediate context of the text, who's Paul writing to? He's writing to the book of, to the church at Corinth, for example. You could then, give a little bit of historical background on the church at Corinth. What was the historical setting there? What does the city of Corinth look like? What were some of the issues that Paul was possibly dealing with in that particular letter? And then, there may be some words in a particular text that you would want to look at. When Paul says, I despaired of life itself, the word despaired. You could look that up and find out what you don't need to know Greek, but you can actually look it up on. There's a good website called the Blue Letter Bible. Maybe some of you have used that. If you haven't, I'll go ahead and put that out. But it has all kinds of tools that you can use, especially if you come at biblical interpretation as a novice. The Blue Letter Bible just has a lot of tools that you can use right there online, and I'll put that out to you. But then so some of the issues, and again, you'll look at some of these, and then the bottom line is, how does this particular text apply to the context that you're working on? Say if we're working with suicide, how might Paul's thoughts on despondency in his own life, if he felt that way, how might we relate that to a person who is contemplating suicide? Anyway, you just have to kind of do some creative thinking. Like I said, in the proposal, you're not really expected to do a whole lot. You're mainly just going to give me a paragraph or two and tell me what you'd like to do with a particular theme, and then tell me at least maybe 2 or 3 sources that you maybe found in literature research that might give you some help in looking at that theme. But again, the theological chapter, you can actually approach it 2 ways. If you found, say, one scripture that you think is very helpful and relevant to your particular topic, you might be able to use that one scripture and find 3 different themes within that scripture that you want to address. Say if we're, say we're working with the topic of servant leadership, I might go to, the instruction that Jesus gives. He says, you have heard that that among, he says, I can't quote it right now exactly. He's the idea. He said, for those of you who will be great among you, you must become servants. He says, in the world, to be great means you lord it over others. He says, I say to you, he who would be great in the kingdom of God must become a servant of all. And so, we might look at that theme in terms of servant leadership. We might see, okay, what are some characteristics of leadership based on only a worldly standard? Another theme might be, what are some characteristics of leadership, leadership based on the model that Jesus has put forth? Okay, so I've come up with 2 themes here out of that passage. Or it may be that it would serve you better to maybe find 3 or 4 different texts that seem to apply to your particular topic, and so each of the subtopics within your chapter would become a separate text. Okay, say we find some text on the concept of justice in, say, the Old Testament, and that becomes a theme. You find one particular topic, one particular scripture, and you do some thinking about that, the context of those words of that particular author, etc. Maybe we find another text on good practices for reconciling differences. Okay, I might go to Matthew 18. There, Jesus tells us how to handle some forms of conflict. If I have something against a brother or sister, I'm supposed to go to them privately and deal with it to start with. If I can't come to some conclusion at that point, I may bring 2 or 3 other people with me, and we try to talk that out together. So there's a whole process of reconciliation that we could go to the New Testament in Matthew 18, and we might say some New Testament concepts for reconciliation. That might be a topic. I'm just kind of thinking, off the top of my head in terms of how certain theological themes might relate to the kinds of topics that some of you are dealing with right now. Give me your thoughts. What do you think? Anything that comes to your mind, questions, comments that we maybe would talk through?
Well, I know I just looked up the Blue Letter Bible. I'd certainly be interested in using that. I did not know about it until now.
Okay.
But one of the other things too that I have found to be a useful resource in this issue is there's something called the Bible Project. And what they do in the Bible Project, they're almost done with the complete Bible right now. It's all online through YouTube and their website. It's just called the Bible Project, where they, in about 5 minutes or less, they do a visual and narrated summary of every book of the Bible.
Wow.
And they're almost done with, and then they have themes where they provide a 5-minute summary of themes in the Bible, such as what is the kingdom of God? What does it mean to be made in the image of God? And I found them to be very helpful to just kind of get me focused. I watch it, and it gets me focused and helps me think through different issues or what the Bible's about. So I find it a very handy summary. So it's called the Bible Project, and I invite, it's available free and anyone can use it. And it's a really good visual depiction of every book of the Bible that's with a narrated description.
Wow, that sounds great. Is the website just called Bible Project?
Yeah, the Bible Project, yeah.
The Bible Project. Okay,
yeah.
Sounds like a good resource.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Theo.
Well, you're welcome.
Sounds very interesting.
Yeah, especially if you're a visual person like I am, it's really cool to see them drawing these pictures and describing the Bible.
Cool to see, and especially the themes, the developed themes.
Yes, I found them very helpful.
Okay, that's very good. Again, that would be part of the general context. Say if you're looking at a particular scripture that's in Corinthians, you may go to the Bible Project and you'll probably get a summary of the book, what its purpose is, or what are some of the general concepts and themes there. And that would give you, just a general idea of what's going on in that book. And then as you kind of zero in on a particular text, you kind of go from the general to the more specific as you relate it to your particular theme. And there again, this is a learning exercise. You'll do a little bit of this in your proposal. So, if you can come up with 3 theological themes, just give me a paragraph under each theme to tell me what you're thinking about in terms of what are some of the issues that you think are germane to that particular theme that you're bringing forth as a part of the theological foundation for your project. And there again, like I say, I'll try to give some help as you send those to me in your proposals. And then, as you do more thinking and research, and I'd really encourage you, of course, everyone has a personal learning community when you're at BGU, and I think that's an excellent place to even talk through the theology of the issue and kind of brainstorm to get some ideas from others in terms of how others may think about theological issues that are related to the particular project topic that you're working on. Okay. So there again, I don't expect you to be experts in this area, but I expect you to give it your best attempt, and we will begin going from there to keep gaining some expertise in this whole theological area of discussion. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions?
Dr. Payne, I have general questions for you. Would that be okay at this stage?
Yes, go ahead and do that.
It's Joanne. It's Joanne.
Joanne.
What it is, we're coming to time together. I'm just wondering what happens after in terms of the dissertation itself. Because we don't have the same setup as we would have had previously, having assistants and tutors and all of that. So is it an independent study? How does it work? I'm not quite sure. The other thing is, the work that we're actually doing now on the proposal, do we have to do a whole, just discard that and do something totally different for a dissertation, or could we utilize all of the chapters for a dissertation?
Yeah, basically, at least the first 3 chapters, your introduction, your context, and your literature review, that's the first 3 chapters of your dissertation. After you've done more research, you would maybe be able to add, a few more titles in the literature review. After you've done a little more research, you may be able to fill out the contextual chapter a little more. But basically, as you just said, those 3 chapters anyway are, they are there. The only difference, and sometimes I'll have to tell students, make sure when you go through it in the proposal, you're saying, I'm going to do such and such. In the dissertation, you're reporting, I did such and such, okay? Past tense, make sure that you change your language. Chapter 4, you'll have the themes for the literature, for the theological section, and you will have told me in the proposal what you plan to do. Then, of course, in the dissertation, you're going to need to do that. You would have a little more, extended discussion and fill out that theology chapter. The research chapter, the methodology chapter is chapter 5. And I can see that my computer is still causing memory problems. Is my audio distorted right now?
It is a little distorted, but I can still pick up what you're saying, sir.
Okay. And I didn't catch the whole part of your question. I think you were asking if you're pretty much on your own as an independent study through the dissertation process.
That's correct. What happens now? I have a supervisor. At what stage do I make contact?
Basically, I would wait. I mean, you're free to talk to your supervisor, correspond, okay? But officially, once you've completed the proposal for this course, and I've given you my comments on that proposal, you would then send that to your supervisor, who would also have recommendations, very possibly. Once you and the supervisor are satisfied with the proposal, then you would send that to Dr. Judy Melton, who would then put that on the agenda for the academic cabinet. And then we as an academic cabinet, those of us who are on that cabinet, would actually give it an official approval of the proposal. And then, and you keep moving on. The actual process then, you really should, once you've completed a chapter, you should send it to your supervisor. That supervisor should review it and give you comments, and keep doing that through the writing of the dissertation. If something that the supervisor can't answer, then you're certainly free to, send me an email with a question, and I can give you, my input.
Okay, that's brilliant. In terms of the preliminaries, how long does that take to get the approval of the academic board?
Generally, once you send that to Judy, she puts it out to all of us by email, and we generally vote even by email. So you can get that process accomplished probably within a week, 2 weeks at most.
Brilliant. Okay, that's very helpful. I just want to know in terms of timing, so you have to complete the dissertation, I guess, or is it until next March?
Okay. I'm taking my video off and see if that helps my sound quality right now. Any other thoughts or questions? Just a minute here.
Joanne, I don't think Dr. Payne heard your
No,
question.
I don't think he did. Dr. Payne? I
Yes.
asked whether, in terms of timing, I was trying to figure out what happens once it's approved, if we have from that point on until maybe the end of the year or March to complete the dissertation by.
Oh, I see what you mean. Can you hear me, first of all?
I can hear you now.
Okay. In the final project handbook, there is, actually I've got a piece of it right here. In the final project handbook, there is a schedule. They try to go through the year from the time a person, say, takes the methodology course, which we're doing right now. It looks like, say if you were going to graduate in 2018, okay, based on the schedule I'm looking here, you'd need to have your final project supervisor approve that by July 30th, and then be able to submit that to the registrar's office by that time, who would then send it to the academic committee. And once that's happened, then you have until, this was a 2016, but you just adjust the dates by a few days. By September 11, write and submit chapter 1 to your final project supervisor. And it kind of goes through that process, October, chapters 2 and 3. By December, by the end of the year, you'd submit your entire draft to a supervisor. And that you can happen by, December, the first week of January. And then by the time you hit February, we're now in the year that you're going to graduate. We're looking, it says here, for a completed final draft. Well, actually, no, by February 1, you would submit the final draft to the registrar again, who would give that to the BGU technical reader. The technical reader looks at a dissertation based on, the APA format or the Turabian format. We'll look at it in terms of grammar and punctuation and, proper citations, references, etc. You'll get then, a whole series of recommendations back from the technical reader. You make those revisions. And then, by the end of February, the first part of March, you would need to have that, that draft pretty well finished. Sometime in March, April, you would arrange for an oral review, which consists of, I usually function as the BGU representative, whoever your supervisor is, and you need to have a second reader who would also look at your project. So, you and 3 of us would come together for what we'd call an oral review. There's a little bit of a presentation that in the final project handbook, you're given an outline for a presentation that just kind of goes over your project. We review with you your project, and then we issue a final evaluation. And then you move toward, Judy then sends that dissertation to the bindery. It gets bound into a book form. And generally, if everything is on schedule, that bound dissertation is available for display at the June graduation.
Okay, thank you very much. That's been helpful. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions before we end this session today? Okay. Like I say, as you'll be working on your context, I think, this week, and I'll give you feedback. And just keep on working. Appreciate you all working in the discussion forums. I don't generally enter the forums myself because I correspond with you, through the weekly assignments. But I do read those, and I really appreciate in being able to see the comments and some of the interaction. Sometimes some of the interaction, I think, is as helpful as the professor's input, because each of you have areas of expertise, and we're all colleagues in this process. And so I just really appreciate being able to read and kind of get some of that feedback as you interact with each other on your topics and your dissertation projects. Well, with that, I'm going to sign off. I've got to jump back into the other staff meeting Zoom room for a little bit, but I appreciate you making the effort to join us today, and just pray that God keeps using the dissertation process to do whatever it is God is doing in your particular area and context. And again, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Payne. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye, thanks.
Bye-bye.